Chapter 18. Never trust a cripple. I'm waiting for something to happen. The whole world except me is asleep, and the only sound is him breathing heavy. I'm trying to see through the curtains, out the old lady's window when it finally gets light, but the snow is stuck to the glass and everything is fuzzy, which is pretty much how I feel. Looking down at him on the floor, how he overflows the rug, I think about the story where a giant falls asleep and is tied up by little people. Not that I do anything. I'm just a blob in the chair with numb hands and numb feet. Finally, what happens? There's a noise from the back and these light, skittery footsteps. And then my father comes awake so fast he almost yanks me from the chair. He's on his feet with this wild look in his eye, and Loretta Lee glides into the room. "Merry Christmas, boys," she says. She's got this pizza box in her hands, holding it out like a present. "Where's Iggy?" my father asks.
"Waiting for Santa Claus," Loretta says. "Ain't nothing open this morning, but we got this left over. You're welcome to it."
"Best put that down," he says, and he pulls out on the rope and lifts me up. He gives her this cold look. "You go on and get Iggy," he says. Loretta Lee is wearing this long winter coat. It looks clean and brand new, so she probably got it for Christmas. But her legs are skinny and bare where her feet go into these old rubber boots. She's smoking the cigarette and squinting through the smoke at my father like she's trying to figure out what he's thinking.
"Why can't you be nice, Kenny?" she says. "We had some good times in the old days, remember?"
"The old days are over," he says. "That the best you could do for us? Leftover pizza?"
"Hey, pizza's good for you," she says. "It has vitamins and stuff."
"I still want to see Iggy." Loretta takes a drag on her cigarette, and she's got this crooked smile. Her eyes keep flicking at me the way I'm roped up, but mostly she's looking at him.
"Igg'll be up soon," she says. "He had himself a tough night."
"I have business with him, Loretta," he says. "Important business."
"I'm sure,"
she says, and she turns in her boots and leaves through the back. The pizza box is sitting there on the table, but my father says we can't eat anything touched by her dirty hands, so he walks me out into the dark little kitchen and he unties me and we go through the cupboards and find mostly boxes of prunes and old cereal. There's nothing in the refrigerator that hasn't already gone bad, so I eat a bowl of cornflakes with water and I'm so hungry, it almost tastes good. "This is what they call a temporary situation," he says. "I know a way we can live like kings if we play our cards right." He stops for a while and squints at me like he wants to see inside my head. "We'll be heading for warmer weather. That agreeable with you, boy?" "Yes, sir, it is." He seems real thoughtful. "I had a lot of time to plan this out. A lot of time to study people, figure what makes them tick. First thing, we'll get a bus, one of those RV things, a real big one. Because it's important to look impressive. Put a name up on the side. The Reverend Kenneth David Kane. Or it might be we'll go with another name, just to be on the safe side. Did you guess I was a man of God, boy? Could you tell that by looking at me?" "Yes, sir," I say. No, sir." "What's that mean, boy?" I don't know, sir." He reaches out and tussles at my hair. "You'll learn," he says. "You'll be standing out in front of the bus in a real nice suit. What you do is collect money in a basket. You won't have to steal it because folks will give it to a man of God. And what they love to hear about is a bad man who has redeemed himself. I learned how to preach the word to a lot of illiterate convicts, but they were no more ignorant than a lot of the other folk. No, sir. We're going to do just fine." After I finish the cornflakes, he ties me up again. "This is just a precaution," he says. "Can't take any chances until you see the light. You want to see the light?" "Yes, sir, I do." He's grinning at me and taps himself on the chest and says, "You're looking at it, boy. I am the light, and don't you ever forget it." He turns on the TV. It hardly comes on and the screen is so fuzzy. He keeps switching channels and he's cussing out the old lady for having such a crummy TV. All that's on is Christmas stuff and cartoons, and what he wants is the news, to see if we're on it. "I bet they haven't even missed you," he says. Keep you down in that cellar like an animal. How would they know? We're sitting there waiting for Iggy when the blue lights start flashing bright against the curtains. He quick grabs me by the neck and shoves me down to the floor, and we both lie there. The blue lights go by real slow, and you can see them shining all around the room. Might be someone else they're looking for, he says. A place like this, it could be anybody. Still, you can't be too careful. When the lights stop flashing, he crawls to the window and looks out. There's nothing dumber than a dumb cop, he says. If they were so smart, they wouldn't be working on Christmas Day, would they? No, sir, I say. You hush up, boy, let me think. I'm lying there on the floor, tied up, when Iggy sneaks in through the back. I know it's him by the draggy way he walks and the heavy boots. Kenny, he's whispering, you there? Course I'm here, he says. Show yourself. Iggy comes into the room and his eyes are darting around. At first he's surprised to see me trussed up. Then he shrugs and doesn't look at me anymore. Close call, he says. You see that cop car? I saw it. They come right up to my door looking for the boy, he says. I said, come back with a search warrant. You want to see what I keep under my bed, but I let him have a good look from the door. Satisfy him you weren't there. They believe you? Who knows with cops? Then my father is sort of drooping his arm around Iggy and giving him a squeeze, and you can see the cold, scared look in Iggy's little eyes, and that wet mouth of his inside his beard. You turn on me, did you? My father says. That how they just happened to come to your place, of all the places in the town. Iggy laughs real nervous. It was that crippled midget kid, he says. They had him out in the car. It must have been him. Loretta saw him peeking up over the seat. Freak. What midget kid? My father asks. You think I'll fall for that? Iggy points at me and says, ask him. He does have a midget friend. The two of them stole Loretta's purse. That's how come they know this place. That's the God's honest truth, Kenny. My father kneels down and looks at me all close. His face doesn't show anything. Well, he says, what's your story? We didn't steal it, I say. We just brought it back. Oh, my father says, now that's an interesting story. I like that story. Iggy is talking fast, like he can't wait to get rid of the words and leave. The crippled up kid belongs to Gwen. Remember Gwen? Her and your wife are pals. That's what Loretta says. My father puts his hand on Iggy and shoves him down into the old lady's chair. Never mind about her. It doesn't matter how the cops got onto you. All that matters is they did. And now what do we do about it? Iggy is scratching at his beard, and he starts to say something, and my father says, shut up and let me think. Iggy shuts up. Every now and then he sneaks a look at me like he's trying to tell me something with his eyes, but I can't figure out what. After a while, my father says, first thing, get me a firearm. Something small but functional. Next thing is transportation. I don't care what, as long as it runs. Can you do that for me? Iggy says he can, no problem. Then do it, my father says. The quicker, the better. Iggy leaves, walking backward out of the room. My father lifts me up by the rope and says, I know you have more sense than to waste your time stealing pocketbooks with a cripple kid. You can't trust a cripple, but I guess you know that now, don't you? He shakes the rope. Yes, sir, I do. Chapter 19. Into the Black Down Under. We have to leave the old lady's place because you never know. The cops might come knocking on each door. They're like bugs, my father says. They're not too smart, but there's lots of them and they keep at it. On the other side of the alley is this boarded-up building. It used to be part of the Testaments until a fire burned it out. And my father decides we'll hide there until Iggy gets a car for us. He reaches out and pulls off a big piece of plywood with one hand. The screechy noise the nail makes sounds like a cat fight, and the next thing, there's a real cat, a black one, that leaps out from beyond the plywood. My father jumps so hard he yanks me on the ground and I bump my head. Dumb animal, he says. Get up now, that's just a scratch. A little blood never hurt a man. It doesn't hurt. And anyhow, I sort of like the taste of salt in my mouth. It makes me feel awake. Get in there, he says, and then he's pulling me through this old burned-out window, and we're inside the building. Everything is black and wet and dripping except for where snow has come down through the holes in the roof. Most of the inside walls are gone, and you can see where the center beam was chewed by the fire. All the old pipes and wires are hanging down, and everywhere underfoot is broken glass the color of smoke. I used to wonder exactly what hell looked like, he says. Now I know. He finds a place where the stairs go down into the basement, and he pulls away the boards and planks. You should feel right at home, he says, cooped up like you were in that cellar hole. It's so dark he has to use a cigarette lighter, and the flame is so puny you still can't see to the bottom of the stairs. You go first, he says. We can't have both of us on the same step. It might break. The steps are made of thick wood, but slick and punky soft where the water has been dripping all these years, and I can feel how it sags under my feet. There's a rail that's hard to grab with my hands tied, and the way he's holding up the lighter, you might as well keep your eyes closed because it's that dark. You can't see a thing. I slip and start to fall, and then he's pulling back on the rope, and I'm hanging there in the middle of the air with my feet skittering, and he's going, Easy does it, boy. We'll take this one step at a time. Finally, we get to the bottom. There's a little slant of light coming through the narrow cellar window, enough so we can feel our way around all the burned junk that has fallen through the floor. The accommodations could be better, he says. I'll grant you that. Soon as Iggy fixes things, we'll be on our way. He ties my feet back up and loops the rope tight around this old busted-up boiler that's tipped over, so I can't move or see what's behind me. Understand you can't be trusted quite yet, he says. Once we get on the road, things will be different. You'll get smarter. Every mile we put between us and this place. He rips a piece of my shirt and ties it on my mouth so I can't be shouting, he says, and wake up the neighborhood. He rubs his hands through my hair again, real gentle. I'm pretty sure there's this sweet smile on his face, although it's so dim you can't be sure. You just sit tight here a minute, he says. I have to see a man about a car. Then he's gliding away, and I hold myself still in case this is a trick and he's really sneaking up behind me to see if I can get my hands loose. Which I can't. They're numb and bloated from the rope cutting into my wrists, and finally I stop trying and just sit there letting my eyes open in the dark. I can barely make out the narrow window, hardly big enough so a cat could slip through, and under it is this big pile of coal slagged up against the foundation wall. Overhead there's creaking with the weight of him moving around, trying to be light on his feet. I'm listening to him up there and trying to see out the little window where something moves against the light. I'm pretty sure there's a scratching sound coming from the window, except you can't always believe what you hear in the dark. Then whatever it is goes away and I'm thinking it was probably a cat, or maybe a dog sniffing around. Finally, I just keep still, because the more I move, the tighter the rope gets. Next thing I hear someone on the steps, these light feet trying to be real quiet, and then a flashlight comes on and this woman's voice says, You there, kid? Loretta Lee. I can't say anything because of the gag. All I can do is sort of kick around a little, let her know where I am. You can tell by her shaky, thin voice she's scared of the dark. Kid? Tell me that's you. Oh, Lord Jesus, what am I doing down here? Then the beam of light of the flashlight is hitting me right in the eyes, and she's tripping over stuff trying to get to me. First thing she does is pull the gag off, and I take a deep, deep breath that makes my lungs burn. It ain't right, she whispers. Keeping your own kid tied up. It ain't right. He ain't the man I thought I remembered, that's for sure. I want to say something, but I'm not sure what, and anyhow, my mouth is too dry. She's put the flashlight on the floor, aiming up so she can try to untie the rope. The man's a genius for knots, she says. I can feel how her hands are shaking as she's fumbling around. Also, I can hear the boards creaking overhead, but you can't be sure. It might just be the wind. Loretta goes, The plan is, Iggy keeps him busy while I get you loose. Now, isn't that a good plan? There's enough cops up there to start a war. We'll be safe enough when we get out of this godforsaken place. Her hands are pulling at the rope, nervous and quick, but the knot just keeps getting tighter. Finally, she gets this idea to cut the rope on the ragged edge of the boiler. I saw this in the movies once, she whispers. I forget what movie. She's working on the rope against the sharp edges of that old boiler, and sure enough, it cuts through. Just the one cut won't do it, though, and she has to do it twice more before my wrists get loose, and I can't really help much because my hands are all numb and swollen.
Next thing is this piece around your ankles, she says. I'm sure I can't carry you up out of here. You think you can walk if I get this loose?
Yes, ma'am, I say. That makes her giggle.
My, we got polite all of a sudden, she says. There, that should do it.
My feet come loose and I try to stand up and I have to lean some of my weight on her. She goes,
Just a second, sugar. Let me get this flashlight.
She bends over for the flashlight, and then she's making this sound like something is caught in her throat. 2 big hands are squeezing her neck. I see how my father is coming huge out of the darkness, and he's got his hands around her throat, shoving her back. You ignorant creature, he says. I'll teach you to put your dirty hands on my son. Loretta can't say anything. She's sinking down to her knees and trying to pull his hands away from her neck, but it's useless. She can't stop him. He's squeezing her dead with his bare hands, and no one can stop him. No one. No one.